that whole focus you have on the origin of food and how that, how do you feel about Monsanto?
Well, Monsanto they are the Dark Lord. They represent, we won't speak his name here, but that is the unspeakable entity that has so thoroughly dominated food science for better and worse, because their motives have not always been nefarious. And I know Monsanto scientists. I've allowed my children to hang out in the home of a Monsanto scientist. My daughter also stood up in front of an audience in our nation's capital as part of her National History Day competition and represented Rachel Carson in a spoken presentation where she had to actually play the role of 7 different people, one of whom was Rachel Carson. It was about her publishing of Silent Spring, why it was done, and the ramifications of it, again, for better or worse. And during that, it's really interesting for those of you who have read the book or know anything about it. Monsanto wasn't the bad guy then. They were really considered to be doing the best thing for America. They were backed by the president. They were backed by policymakers. And this was at around the time that we were just giving birth to post-war industrialism when it comes to food. So they didn't really take over as the Dark Lord for a while. There were a lot of other entities, there were a lot of other chemical companies, and they were basically using technology to better our food system from their perspective. And what happened as a result of that is that we eradicated entire species. I mean, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of species of plants and breeds of animals that are part of our natural biodiversity in our diet. And by doing that, by stripping these things of a lot of their nutrition and a lot of, the variable components that make them what they are, what you're left with is sort of a nutritional and culinary shadow of its former self. So it's only been in recent years that we've come to understand the gravity of the potential of a Monsanto-dominated food culture. And it's serious. It's really serious. And that's why we have labeling laws now that are coming into play, and depending on what state you're from, you've seen varying degrees of success. But it is absolutely critical, in my opinion, that we know what went into the food, just as much as I want people to know the extent that I go to source my food. That food is real, and I've gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that those ingredients are wholesome and that they're real, that I know the farmer, and he can tell me exactly, how those animals were raised or those vegetables were fed and with what. I had a farmer call me yesterday morning and say he had to put one of his animals down. And it's a very expensive proposition for a livestock farmer, especially in Maine, where you have a higher mortality rate because of the seasonality. In talking to him, I learned that every year he sends 2 or 3 animals into the factory farm world because they don't make the cut in terms of their health. And when I asked him if this is a common practice, he said you wouldn't believe how many farms around the country do that. Your choices are to sacrifice the animal, eat it yourself at your own risk, or do away with it completely. You can sell it to manufacturers of byproducts, but usually USDA won't stamp anything for use for a byproduct if there's been any sort of history of disease. So these diseased animals are going into our factory farm system. Companies like Cargill, IPA, they're buying these animals that are being cast away by responsible farmers. It's super scary.
Could you get a photo